unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J. Andy Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your host, Dr. J, and joining me tonight is my co-host live in London, Johnny Webb. Johnny, how you doing tonight?
Hey, good evening, Dr. J. Doing very well, sir. Been looking today, though, at a very strange creature, a very green, slimy thing that's been pulled out of the sea in Taiwan. And when you look at it, it looks like a big slug, but very luminous green. And then this big red tongue comes out, and then you realize that's not normal. And so I think if you want to check it out on the internet, it's a Taiwanese green monster.
And I love the listeners out there, everybody out there right now on Dark Matter. Thank you for submitting things to me. That is what this is all about. Information. If it isn't for you guys out there, we wouldn't be doing this. I would not be donating my time and finding these guests and rounding up these shows to present this information to you guys if it wasn't for you guys actually caring about what is being said. And the news that you guys have been sharing that to disseminate with all of you is super fantastic. I know this came up with this creature, and that's why I had Johnny explain it since he knew more about it. I'd like to hear more news from you guys. Today is a little slower, but we'll get to some more soon. You will hear something fantastic that I will bring up on Tuesday's show. Now, today's guest, before we bring him in, I'm going to give you some background. You guys are about to go in for a long ride. We're going to be speaking about everything from Planet X, Nibiru, to the financial conspiracies, to basically everything, because this guest was able to link up everything that was going around. Now, before we introduce him, since I said the news, you listeners out there, send them to me at drjradiolive.com. Just hit the contact button. And when you want me to give you credit, please say that. Say, I would like my name to be said. And as you remember, during the Dr. Greer show, someone sent a letter saying, please read this to Dr. Greer and with my name on it. And I did. I'll do the same thing for you guys when you have a guest request. Of course, we take guest requests. And if you see a guest coming up that you would like a letter read to, send it to me. And the news, as I mentioned before, keep bringing us the news. Real quick, also the other plugs, the YouTube. We are back up and running on plugging those up. There's some new videos. I hope you guys all check them out of the past interviews you might have missed. And, of course, you all know Art is coming back in a month. I hope everybody's excited. Just a little over a month. That is going to be fantastic. Without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. And that happens to be Bob Fletcher. Let's go get him, folks.
So the fellow was running the observatory out of Washington for the Navy, for the U.S. government. His name was Harrington, and he had contacted Sitchin like I say, during a period of time when an awful lot of people were just saying, oh, this Sitchin guy is really crazy, et cetera, talking about Nibiru. And Harrington got with him and invited him to his offices. And fortunately, we do have videotapes of that meeting, because otherwise people would be saying it was made up. But Robert Harrington got with Dr. Sitchin, sat down with him in Washington, and said, we have been looking, snooping as best we can, astronomically, looking for this Planet X for many years without talking much about it. And we have, for our part, we have found it. I have found that this is real and Planet X is real and it's out there. And I wanted you to know that for all of your work that you've been doing, that you've been absolutely right on, and we have at least discovered what appears to be Planet X. The planet itself is about 5 times the size of Earth, and there are 4 or 5 moons traveling with Planet X, traveling around it, just like moons do on other planetary structures, so to speak. And apparently, when they were finally positive that this was coming in around 1983, 84, during that period of time in Reagan's administration. That was when he did that strange speech on the floor of the United Nations. And Ronald Reagan said, I wonder how all of us different nations, how we would get together and become singular if, in fact, there was some strange, and I'm trying to think of the actual word.
If we were faced with an alien threat from outer space, wouldn't we all forget our petty little differences and come together? And he said that at a high school graduation and again at the UN.
On the floor of the UN, speaking to the Russians and the Chinese and Japanese and everyone worldwide. And the people always they sort of looked at each other like what's he talking about? It's kind of like, it was sort of like from nowhere. It was not a conversation. He said, gee, I wonder, and now nobody ever knew whether he was talking alien as in beings or just alien as is an unknown element coming from outer space, whichever it is, and if their two are connected, well, that remains to be seen. But to get back to my investigations, I was really skeptical, obviously, getting into this thing, because there just wasn't any real good proof, except for the fact, like I say, that the money disappeared. So I pursued then all of these people that had told me about the underground facilities, and including, by the way, telling me about driving underground in the 18-wheeler, 40-foot trucks, making deliveries, and some of them telling me that they had actually driven hundreds of miles underground from one location to another and making deliveries, and then pulling up and being in a different state altogether, completely driven totally underground. Then they told me about magnetic levitated train systems that some of the underground bases in the United States had the ability and had underground an entire interconnecting maglev trains traveling very fast, obviously, because just like the ones in Japan above ground that go at 400 or 500 miles an hour, and from one location to another, because there's no manner by which they can. There's nothing that crosses the tracks. Yeah. So, and they talk about 18-wheelers driving side by side and crossing at intersections underground, and of course this was. Wow! But the people sent me videos of it, and again, some of them actually went back to the 90s. So now, all of a sudden, I got thinking, wow, these underground facilities, they would cost a fortune to do. These are done, by the way, with gigantic drilling operations, huge drilling heads that are so large that they could go into a side of a mountain and be pulled back out, and they're already big enough so that an 18-wheeler could drive with going in just into the hole that a single drill made. So then I started looking around worldwide because it dawned on me that if the United States knew about this at that highest level, that the Nibiru was going to come back close in again in a short period of time, if they knew about it, the other nations had to know. So I started doing, some connections, et cetera, and started doing snooping. And I find out that the Russians in 2010 put out actually pretty much a public mandate and said that we're going to have and finish and construct 5,000 small but 5,000 underground facilities to be completed by about 2014. All right, and that was back in 2010, that period of time. So now we have the United States has under the banner of continuity of government. Anybody that talks about underground facilities, they say, oh, that's just the continuity of government program in case we're attacked. We're going to have an ability for people to still run the government, in case of some type of a major attack. But and that's a great that's a great excuse for digging holes. So that's what they've been using as a reason. But then I found out that in America we have 103 of them, something like that, and they have even taken over the old, what was the continuing NORAD facility inside the Granite Mountain, where they had been tracking missiles, the potential of incoming attack missiles for like 30 years. They've taken that one over and taken all of that protective instrumentation and everything and relocated it to another Air Force base so that they could utilize the Cheyenne Mountain NORAD location, which has been extraordinarily well maintained for many years. They added that to the list of underground salvation locations for the limited few. So they've added that one to the list. So then I started looking more, and so here we have Russia with 5,000, and by the way, they have accomplished satisfactory for themselves thousands of these underground quote-unquote bomb shelters in Russia, brand new ones. Then I look into the Chinese, I find out that Red China has thousands of them, and many of them were old underground facilities that go back even 500 years, 1,000 years, back when they used to use them, tunnels inside the mountains. They used to use them as from let's say, platforms from which they would attack or protect their government, their country at that time, 100 years, 500 years ago, and then run back inside the mountains. So they actually had a lot of these half completed. But then when I looked into it more carefully, I found out that the Red Chinese had taken our concept of these tunnel boring mechanisms and tripled up on them. They have a single drill. Of course, there's several of them. They have a single under-the-ground drilling apparatus that is 3 times the size of our largest one in the United States. And it literally is the equivalent of like a giant hole boring mechanism that we use, and then 2 others affixed to both sides of it to where it's 1, 2, 3 of these gigantic boring heads that can go into the side of a mountain. And if it's a loose terrain, they utilize lasers to solidify the outside of the material if it happens to be soft ground for a while and then hard ground, whatever. They were able to actually solidify the sides of these holes they've dug, but they can do it with one giant drill. And the Russians now have facilities that are large enough, or excuse me, the Chinese have facilities large enough to maintain and hide and store not only intercontinental ballistic missiles by the hundreds, but also entire airplane fleets. They have submarines and battleships underground and in their storage in case of something coming in. All right? So now we have the Russians with thousands of these things, the Red Chinese with probably the same numbers. The Russians have one large location that actually is said to be able to hold as many as 50,000 people. This is not part of the smaller 5,000 that were accomplished a few years ago, but this one is a singular location that can handle 50,000 humans for some unknown period of time. Now, for the last 20 years, they've been not only finishing these and making sure that they're capable of storing human beings and whatever else they need underground, but they also have, in fact, created a few of them that are strictly for storage of foods and foodstuffs. Some of them have been created exclusively for growing foods. They're interconnected with the areas where people can live, and then they have areas where they actually have underground growing operations completely set up. They had filled them over the last few years with thousands of tons of freeze-dried foods, survival foods, that has also put it in a situation in the last 5 years where the biggest companies that do freeze-dried and survival food, storage foods, were unable to fill standard commercial contracts because the U.S. government had bought up almost everything for the last 5 years that they were able to manufacture. They filled these facilities with unbelievable volume of survival foods. So now it's very clear to where this huge amount of money would have disappeared. Some of the gold, I'm sure, is actually dispersed into hideouts, some of these as hideouts for the gold for some later periods of time, but then a lot of it has been actually utilized in financing and paying for these unbelievable underground facilities.
Okay, Bob, let me ask you a quick question.
Sure.
The fact that Germany is expecting their gold in 2020, and obviously if we can't deliver it, since we've used a lot of it to build these underground bunkers or giant facilities, and of course to buy supplies and freeze-dried foods, as well as stashing some of it. Do you think that the reason why they said 2020 is because they know by then there'll be nobody to give the gold back to?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The 2020 is totally a false date because of exactly what you said. They're anticipating, and I'm going to get to that shortly here. And by the way, let me know how we are with time. Don't let me.
Yeah, we got about 20 minutes till break.
Okay, fine. And let me tell you some more. If all of this was not enough to convince me, and by the way, I have to say this. In our DVD, which is a double DVD, unfortunately it's 4 hours. I wish we could have appropriately done it in less time, but I wanted to show everybody the connection, the religious connection, the scientific connection, and all the rest of that. I wanted to include it all so that none of it looks hokey, okay? So it actually takes a lot of time. But in the DVD package, we include all of this, everything, including live footage and photographs of the underground facilities. Another one that's important that was another thing that actually can be verified by people out there just going on the computer, and that is these seed vaults where they've gone in Denmark area, and they've gone on what actually is an island almost. It's like a granite island where they go into the side of the mountain with a huge international cooperative seed vault. I guess it's in Norway, actually. I think I said Denmark. It's in Norway. But it's been cooperatively constructed and was finished in 2012. And it is filled.
Is that the seed bank, is it?
Right. It's called the Seed Vault. And if anybody wants to check it, what you do is go on the website, just go on Google and just Google International Seed Vault Norway, and you'll see it yourself. You can find it there. And what they've done is built this, again, a survival facility, but this one is totally for holding and maintaining and keeping millions of seeds for the reseeding of the entire globe after everything that's the trees, the flowers, the seeds, the wheat, the grain has all been destroyed by some disaster. And it literally is, it is to reseed the globe once again. Now, that's a big one that's cooperative. There are also two others that I don't have specifics, but I only to tell you that there are two other locations besides this one that I am aware of. By the way, some of these facilities, and when you see when you see and actually look at these things, they're mind-boggling. These holes that they're able to drill with this equipment I'm talking about, and some of them, they've been working on them for years and years and years. They are so large that they just set you back. And in terms of comfort, in the very biggest and best of these things, you would think once you're down inside of them, and they're multi-level, some of them are more complex and larger than others, but some of them inside are like the luxury hotels in downtown New York City. You would not even know you were underground other than, and as a matter of fact, some of the what would represent windows, they've actually got cameras and whatever set up so that you could look, be down underneath, and as if you were looking out on the upper level of the ground in terms of looking at what are synthetic windows underground are actually television screens, if you will, with security cameras, etc. So it's, to look at putting together the puzzle, all right, piece by piece, little by little. I also was aware, back in the 90s they started it. It is now becoming more recognized by the general citizens for the most part. But since the 90s, and early 90s or late 80s, all right, the government had started programs with the sheriff's departments and other police agencies around the United States, and they have been supplying them with military riot control equipment. Now, I'm not talking about regular, let's say, assisting them in getting them a couple of extra guns and bullets and what have you. But they have, for several years, made available to the sheriffs and different police agencies military transport vehicles, water cannons, 50 caliber machine guns mounted on armored vehicles, vehicle transports of different sorts, hand grenade launchers. These are all things that normally would be strictly military use vehicles and equipment. They've made deals, cut deals with the sheriffs and police departments where they said, look, we can get you 5 of these and 2 of these and 6 of these and 150 machine guns available and all the weapons, bullets to go with them, and we can get grenade launchers and some grenades and gas guns and this, that, and the other thing. We'll cut you a deal. We'll bring them back from different parts of the country or the world. We're not going to utilize them, so they're going to let you have them real cheap to fit into your budget. And if they don't fit into your budget, we'll help you finance them. And also, all you have to do is sign on and say that in case of a national emergency, that you will come on board with us and that, you will assist us if we ask you to, because we may need it in the future for some different problems, whatever they may be. Now, what we're talking, and then also we were able to get a hold of course, the actual purchase orders for all of these Homeland Security agencies of all sorts that have been purchasing machine guns. It's like the IRS, the Forestry Service, and people like that, which are low level. These guys don't normally run around with machine guns, hand grenades, and large numbers of bullets for killing people. But they have been ordering them under the Homeland Security mandates, and they've been even synthetically representing that they're going here, they're going there, or in other words, doing what they call false end-user certificates, showing that these 10,000 of these and 500 of these and 6,000 of those are going into here, there, and A, B, C, D, and E in all these bureaucratic operations that, in fact, normally would never use them. So what I'm getting to here is the fact that they're setting up the private citizen policing agencies to be on hand and available for riot control. As many people know, they also discovered, we found 500,000 crematory coffins that were bought and built specifically for order by the CDC. That's the disease control out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we have pictures, of course, and films, all of that, too. Why would they, in advance, order up over 500,000 of the huge plastic coffin containers that, by the way, can, in a need, could handle 2, 3, or 4 bodies in some of them? So
at least I actually saw the research I was digging. If they have nothing else but just literally stack them, they could put as many as 5
Oh, yeah.
per.
And who's
container.
bought these? It's FEMA, is it?
They've been bought. The primary now this one particular group we're referring to was bought by the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. We have I actually have pictures, of course, of all that. Actually, films of they're stacked. They actually moved them a little while because we were taking too many pictures of them. They moved them to an unknown disclosed location. They also, my understanding is there has been another, at least a second, if not a third order for the same kind of numbers on these things as well. So for some reason, they're in advance getting coffins that, by the way, are specifically designed for crematory operations. In other words, they're designed in the patents, patented design in the patents. It describes that they can be burned once they're filled with bodies. They can be burned without any excessive residue going into the air, coming out of the smokestacks of the crematories. So it's kind of pretty creepy stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say that's actually news to me. I didn't know that.
That's literally that is literally in the patents for the material for the coffins themselves. And because these contracts are making some people pretty wealthy too, but I don't know where they're going to spend their money. Now, to go back again to on the since I tried to cover not just. I tried to put it together in terms of, number one, was the politics of this. You know, where did the money go? What are they doing with that? So we figured that out. And then we found out that they were doing these and have these unbelievable underground facilities. What's his name? Jesse Ventura did a little program a while back, actually, I guess a year ago now, where he talked about and went in one of the facilities and actually showed some pictures in it and all. But also in the Ozarks, they found out that there's this one of the huge operations underground that had been utilized as a storage area for many years, has been increased in size, what have you. And, of course, it's, again, just a giant underground facility. And above ground is the one of the largest, actually the 4th largest home in the United States has just been constructed and finished on the top, upstairs, so to speak, on the top of this facility in the Ozark areas. And it is built as a private party house, but it's bigger than any other. It's like I say, it's the 4th largest in the entire United States. But it was built like a military installation. The walls of it are like 3 feet thick, with specialized cement that theoretically could withstand nuclear explosions that were not too far from it, et cetera, et cetera. And it was built by a gentleman who's had high defense contracts for years, and was with and has been with the Central Intelligence for many years. So the idea there is that this potentially could be an above ground coordinating kind of a facility to oversee contact of what's going on once Nibiru starts getting close enough to really cause serious problems on the return in its orbit.
What I wanted to ask Stephen D. Kelly, who's a personal friend of Dr. J here, he's been researching the Getty Museum, the new one, and he says that it's like harboring tens of thousands of guns and armories, as well as obviously all of the precious items. And he says that deep underground there is an entrance to a very secretive military base. You know, I wondered if you were aware of that base.
And okay, I mean, I don't think I am. Sometimes things I say, oh yeah, oh it's that thing. See, there's another part to this. That is things like the important things like certain paintings, historic paintings, and biblical scrolls, and these high-level, important, serious artifacts. Exactly. They're all gone probably already. And what I mean, they're synthetic ones that we go through, they're probably already gone. Another one that I didn't mention, and by the way, I don't even think I have anything in the, I may have a little bit in the DVD, I don't recall, but about the Mormons. The Mormons had these unbelievable into the side of the mountain stuff themselves. I think I do mention it, as a matter of fact, briefly in the DVD.
You also mentioned, if I recall, I thought I heard something about Bigfoot in there. Is that wrong?
No.
Because
Bigfoot. Is that okay. No.
Yeah.
But I do get into the crop circles, because and by the way, there's 22,000 of them now at this point in time. If anybody thinks there's two drunk
Dave, I know it's
guys doing it with boards tied to their butts, that's crazy. Okay.
Tell him,
go ahead, Johnny.
Where I live in London, I go down and visit the crop circles, which is about 150 miles away, about an hour and a half. And when I went down there, got there on the 20th and did the day before, they block it all off. The police block it off because they have a Druid festival with the obviously solstice. But the day before, it was a swine flu virus crop circle, and it had 3 sort of tiers coming down it. I was there to see that, actually, like, for one of the very first people of that morning to see it. And I managed to get it on video as well. You could see clearly there isn't no one around. There's no one been there.
Now, I want to point out, now that I'm talking about back onto the Nibiru orbit for just a minute, when I originally heard that it may be a 3,000-year orbit, not being an astronomer, and again, just applying sense, I got thinking, wait a minute, this thing goes out, way out there where it takes 1,800 years to go out and then 1,800 years to come back again around the sun. I thought, well, that's almost ridiculous, because wouldn't this thing, how long could it do this? And is there anything that would be orbiting like that? And to my surprise, again, when I got into this, I certainly was not an astronomer, and I had totally dependent on experts for that information, as I do with most everything I've investigated. And then it dawned on me when I started studying it myself that we actually have a comet. Of course, we have Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet comes around 75 years. It goes out and then comes back every 75 years, almost like clockwork. It'll come in, give or take about 1 week. You can set your calendar, and it'll show up in a 75-year orbit. And that's pretty long. That's a long time to be on time.
Do you think that when Nibiru comes back into our local orbit, that it's going to have an effect on us?
Oh, certainly. Sure. But I'm going to let me finish this direction I'm going here with this, and you'll understand why I'm talking about the comet. So this, and by the way, basically, I'm going to give you a good idea of what we can expect when it comes close, and a good idea of when we expect it. The comets. The Halley's Comet, 75 years. But then I found out that there was a comet called Hale-Bopp Comet. That came around. It was not even discovered until, I believe, 75, I think. But anyhow, when it came around, and it has already come now and gone back out again, but that one is on a 4,200-year orbit. So now we have one that's known. Now, this, of course, is a comet. It's a different thing. It's not a planet. It's a comet. But it was verified that it will not be back for 4,200 years. But it is on that big of an orbit. So then right away I said, see, my idea was that maybe this was baloney because we were talking about a 3,000-year cycle, a 3,000-year orbit. And we have another one that actually is longer, the Hale-Bopp
the
comet.
people of Heaven's Gate, I remember that they said that there was a UFO behind Hale-Bopp and that they were all going to put on their Nike shoes and go visit.
But more than that, Johnny, don't forget that was the same week as the Phoenix Lights.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but and again, my big point was it threw my little idea stuck in the back of my head that maybe this was baloney. This is earlier on in my investigating, that maybe it was baloney was on the basis of being such an extraordinary long orbit. But here comes the Hale-Bopp comet that apparently is even a longer orbit altogether. And then additionally, I found out little things that were fitting into the puzzle, so to speak. Mr. Woolsey, James Woolsey, the head of the CIA for several years, he quit a while back, a year and a half ago. And also Janet Napolitano, she quit approximately the same period of time. And both of these folks, when they left, they said, some people were asking them questions of, is there anything you want to say, when you leave and you know all these things and everything. Both of them said, well, one thing that everybody has to be aware of, that pretty soon we need to expect a solar flare that's going to electronically fry all of the electronics and put us into complete darkness. And both of them said the same thing. They were separate, but they said the same thing. It's not if it will happen, but beware that it is going to happen, and it's just a matter of when. Now, they did not say anything relative to Nibiru because it's pretty much a top security situation where nobody of a high-capacity government person is supposed to be talking about this. Because now you'll understand also this refers back to the military supplies to our weapons supplies to our sheriffs and the police for government riot control. Because you have to realize something, at no point in time is anybody at the highest level of our government or any other government going to come out and tell the people that there's a planet coming in that's going to have extraordinary effects on the globe. They're never going to do that. They're going to be obligated to create a situation that requires martial law in the United States, and of course other countries will follow. But martial law in the United States, for some reason, there's 3 or 4 that I will point out to you when we come back from the break. But we're going to have martial law will have to be in effect before this star starts to show up in the sky to where thousands of people start looking up and saying, what is that?
At the moment, I've been watching this very carefully recently, what's that we get on the sun, and then this big black hole sun that was on a few years ago, like a massive black spot over almost a whole cap of the sun. And then just a couple of years ago, I think 2011, there was a big black disc sucking like an umbilical cord it had connected to the sun.
Correct.
And it was sucking off, and then it just pulled away, and this umbilical sort of rejected back, and it was like, wow, look at that. And I put that to Stanton Friedman. I said, look, you're a nuclear physicist. He said, that's right. 1938, we found out about the sun being a nuclear fusion. I said, yeah, well, that's right. What about this black hole that's on the sun, and what about this big black disk? He said, oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, right. And yeah, that disc thing, that's pretty interesting. I viewed that
It's
several
fabulous,
times.
because
Yeah,
it's not
and
just
it's
the one footage. There's the soul footage from it as well, with the 2 mirroring cameras that do the same footage in a different...
Yes, right. Yeah, and the point is, I guess, first off, whatever's out there in terms of alien persons, okay, they're so far ahead of us, they... and because the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is, first off, that was really big. The size of it would have been extraordinary, that disc. Comparative thing, because the sun the Earth next to that same picture, the sun, would be like a period at the end of a sentence, in terms of its size. So that disk would have been pretty huge. But then, of course, the big deal is, how in God's name does it get close enough to do some kind of an attaching there, and without just deteriorating, melting, because we're not talking about a spring day.
Maybe the sun then is not hot like we think. It's not, we think of cold fusion. That's not hot, is it? It's still fusion. So maybe it looks like it's hot, but it's not.
But, well, I don't know about that. But I would tend to think that it just plain is pretty damn hot. It would mean, obviously, that they had some manner by which to just deflect it or protect themselves in some manner.
Yeah, some umbrella.
Some type of a sheet, right?
Exactly. With that being said, Bob, everybody hang tight. We'll be taking a quick break. When we return, we'll have so much more. As you see, Bob has so much info, and we are getting ready to connect even more dots. Hang tight, everybody.
And you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
Welcome back, everybody. Another fascinating interview we've had with Bob Fletcher. Of course, we'll be picking right back up. Just a reminder, upcoming guests you can see at drjradiolive.com, drjradiolive.com, and of course, all social media accounts are under the same name, DRJ Radio Live. So if you want to send a tweet, Instagram, Flickr, Tumblr, or check out our YouTube channel where these videos are archived to the audios, of course, check it out under DRJ Radio Live. With that being said, let's go ahead and ask our guest where we can find his information as well as where to get the DVD. Bob, what is your website? And let's tell everyone where they can find
Sure.
Planet
Okay.
X,
It's
Double D.
the website is bobfletcherinvestigations.com. That's BobFletcherInvestigations.com. And if you put Bob Fletcher Nibiru or any of those things in on Google, you'll probably be tracked and put forward to us. But it's BobFletcherInvestigations.com. Now, for some folks, believe it or not, that just not into doing the computer business for one reason or another, you can send me a note if you wish, and it would be to Post Office Box 216, Bayview, Idaho. That's 216, Bayview, Idaho, 83803. That's 83803, and it's Bob Fletcher at Box 216, and we'd be glad. And of course, it's USA, Bayview, USA, and we'll certainly send you a little catalog showing you what we have available, because I do have I have about 10 DVD reports prior to doing this one on Nibiru, and they cover very specifically my own investigations relative to illegal arms, murder, assassinations, and things of that sort that I was directly involved with on the inquiry. So I don't carry any other miscellaneous things like snake oil to rub on your elbows or anything like that. We just strictly handle our own investigations, but be sure and look it up and go from there. And that's where you can get it in terms of getting our DVD. You can, we certainly online, you can order it that way, or you can, in fact, drop me a note. And it is 4 hours. It's 2 discs, and we pay for the shipping, and we ask $24.95 for both discs. So if you will, that's just one price, $24.95 for the whole package. All right, very good. I hate doing this commercial type stuff. I don't know, it bothers me, but okay.
It's okay. But the DVD is really important. Now, because I love it how it connected all the dots. I mean, honestly, it was one of those really fascinating DVDs. Right before we went to break, we were talking about martial law and why. And I want to ask you, why do the governments have to implement?
And this is very important. It's important because people always ask a couple of things. They ask, when's it coming and what's going to happen when it comes, obviously. And we're going to get to that pretty specifically today here. And that's all included in the DVD. But the point is, another question they ask is, why don't they tell us, or when are they going to tell us, and how are they going to tell us about this? And I am absolutely positive that they will not tell us at any point in time that this thing is coming in. And now you're going to understand real simple, and it's a very logical thing. If any one of you out there, everybody that's listening to us tonight, the point is, if you were the president of the United States, and let's say you were a good guy, all right? I haven't seen one of them in a long time, and I've been around for 70 years. The point is, there's no way that you can tell the general public that something like this is going to happen from the governmental point of view. It would be global hysteria. There would be people not going to work, people quitting their jobs. I mean, all sorts of outrageous things. You want to talk people worried about financial crash. Boy, that would take place in 15 minutes when they actually announced that this was coming in. So it's not going to happen. You're just not going to get that official announcement. But I'm going to tell you right now what probably is going to take place, and then you're going to know what's really going on. And that is, they're going to have to do the martial law. They will do it on either, number one, the potential of World War III, very seriously ready to maybe break out, all right? And now I'm going to give you just the 3 headlines on this. The next one might potentially be something like an out-of-control disease, like Ebola, or something else that all of a sudden is spreading like the Spanish flu did back many years back. That actually did kill a lot of people. They may use that, or they will simply use, which is going to be also an easy one, and that is terrorism. terrorism reaching a point in the United States and around the globe to where it's an obligation, this is what they're going to be telling us, an obligation to do martial law to protect the citizens. And they have to have one of those three reasons is what will take place. And when they do that, it also, from their point of view, and I'm going to say there, talking about the highest level of corrupted persons in government, they have to make you think and welcome it. You have to be welcoming martial law. They don't want a lot of resistance to it, and but they're going to have martial law in place, probably a minimum of 60 to 90 days before the first sighting is anticipated of this thing headed back in towards Earth, okay, or actually coming back towards the sun and passing in a crossing our path, and that's the way it would come. Now, I have to also point something out, is people say, and you get a lot of things out on the YouTube where people say, oh, I took a picture of my grandmother and I think in the background is Nibiru, or I saw Nibiru next to the moon, or I saw it next to the sun came up there. With something we forget about, and that is that here on Earth, all right, we are on a plane where most of the planets are. It's called the plane of the ecliptic, and it's somewhat of a flat plane. Most all of our planets, are, including ourselves, going around the sun in our orbital configurations, reasonably on the same plane, give or take a few gazillion miles. But when we're talking inner space and extraterrestrial and what have you, the mileage kind of becomes a moot point because it's so extraordinary in terms of size. All right, so if you're standing and you put your right arm out, straight out from your shoulder, that would be like the plane of the ecliptic that most all the planets are, and your head could be the equivalent of the sun. All right, so your arm would be coming off on a reasonably flat plane. Now, there's a conflict between people that have been studying this astronomically and scientifically for so many years. Some of them, half of them, believe it will be coming in on that flat plane of ecliptic. It would be still coming in somewhat on that same plane that we are on. If you put your arm out and say put your hand into a fist, that potentially could be Pluto, and with Nibiru coming in from farther out than Pluto. But there's a big argument, and both of them have a very good astronomical strength to them, so I'm not sure which is going to be which. But if you put your hand down now about 7 or 8 inches, that would be about 30 degrees south of the ecliptic line, or the planetary line. If you put your hand down about 6 or 8 inches, if it's coming in from a position below the ecliptic, it's not going to be seen very easily. If it comes in, depending on when, where, who, what, and why, if it's approaching from the direction from our vantage point, of the sun, or from behind the sun, again, it's not easily seen until a point in time when it is really pretty close. All right? So you have this problem where everybody says, why can't I just look out and see it, and et cetera. The other problem
can it
is...
be seen in the South Pole?
I see at certain periods of time, I think some of the shots that have come from the South Pole and that area is real. Some of those, I believe, are potentially real, yeah. But it's still way far out there. It's not, this is not something that I can say today that anybody's getting good shots unless they're, again, telescopic and they're infrared. Because, yes, sir.
Well, Bob, let me ask you this, though. Where it is right now, are we being affected by it? I mean, we know what's going to happen when it gets here, But where it is right now, I know we have like you said, it's difficult to photograph it, but obviously, if we're already photographing it, therefore, I'm curious, is it having an effect on Earth
yes.
right now?
And that's one thing that additionally that I really looked into was, if this, see the dynamics of space and the interreaction of planets and groups of planets to each other and all the rest of that, I relate it to something like a bowling ball coming into the bowling pins, all right? And very minute reactions to things can take place with celestial bodies that are, or just physical planetary bodies that are way, way far out. As it starts coming back in, which it is doing now, in my opinion, and the opinion of people that know, is that it's on its way back in. We already have many more falling shooting stars and little types of meteoric junk coming in, much more than we usually have had in the past. As you'll look back just in the last 2, 3, 4 years, all of a sudden, like in Russia, they had the one that came on in, and we didn't even know about that. They couldn't see it. And when the scientists at NASA were asked, why didn't we see that meteoric piece that came in and blew the windows out in Russia a couple of years ago? How come we didn't know it was coming? The simple answer was, by the head of NASA, is that it was coming from the view of the sun, and we didn't see it. And that is very easily applied to Nibiru. Now, it's already coming in, starting to smack through things as it comes. As it slowly begins to head back to go around the sun. All right? So therefore, we also have other things. We have the crazy sun in the last few years has been doing extraordinary, strange reactions, including developing holes on it. I believe the magnetics of this and its influence on other bodies coming back in is causing those bodies to also cause effect already on the sun. I believe all of these, or the bulk of the fish and the animals and stuff that have been dropping dead for the last 3 or 4 years, the fish swimming, the whales beaching themselves because they don't know what direction to go, and millions of birds. Last 2 weeks ago in Idaho, we had, I think it was 2,000 birds just fell from the sky, and that was only a couple of weeks ago. And I believe, and of course, see, they're talking about this aviary, the flu that they said was maybe bothering them. I don't buy that, because what's also happening is the glaciers are melting from underneath. They're melting beneath the surface around the globe. We are having more. This is something, by the way, that I predicted in the DVD before we put it out. I mean, it's in the DVD, and now we have watched the winter. I said that because of Nibiru, this weather for this winter would be the strangest we've had in years. And what happened? Northeast New York City area and up there, they've had snow that they can't even measure. Okay, and that's an effect, I think, the changing of the weather. And by the way, here in the Idaho area, where I happen to live now, and by the way, I've lived all over the country, but where I'm living now in Idaho, we've had like a springtime. It's springtime today, and this entire winter for us, we had hardly any snow at all here. The South and California area, by the way, the people that are not aware of it, the drought there is into its 4th year, and the drought is not going to change. We're going to end up like we have about 6 or 8 more months, and there's not going to be any crops worth a darn coming out of California for another 5 years. It's just totally wiping out the growing season. And again, now, when people say, oh, gee, I don't know whether that's, you can't even see this thing, et cetera, et cetera. But we have things like the snow melting. And let me tell you how much it's changed in terms of the melting of some of these glaciers that people are not paying attention to. They're not telling you about this on ABC or CBS, okay? In Miami, Florida, starting about a year ago, the high tides every day in Miami Beach had gotten so high on a regular basis, they're coming 6 blocks into the city. In Miami Beach, about 9 months ago, they installed water pumps, millions of dollars of water pumps in Miami Beach to control the standard high tide, which is now no longer stopping at the beach, but going several blocks into the city of Miami Beach. And again, yeah, you can look this up on the, put this into the computer, Miami Beach flooding from high tides. That's all you have to Google, Miami Beach flooding from high tides, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Additionally, something has taken place. It's already started. As we speak, there's something like 45 volcanoes blowing the top as we speak. I'm not talking about next year. I'm not talking about 7 or 8 of them at one time. I'm talking about over 40 of them. And I put that in the DVD before it started, and I said that we're going to have volcanoes, and I'm surprised that we haven't had more earthquakes. But I would say pay attention because we are going to have probably earthquakes as well. All right? So in terms of whether it's affecting us, all this crazy weather, and they're good, and see, the people, even scientists that really don't have a handle on this, they're never obviously going to say, oh, I think it's a Planet X coming in and it's already affecting us. I believe that it is already affecting us, and there's entirely too much of it to deny it. I guess people still will deny it, but the bottom line is I did predict it, and I'm not psychic or any of that. I'm not talking about any of that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about what I believe is in fact happening, and what I anticipated would happen has already happened, and that is craziest weather in the last year. The numbers of records, worldwide temperature and weather records, are extraordinary, the numbers that have been broken in the last 2 or 3 years. And again, the animals dying and all of that, it's all part of it. The bees, they're talking about it being possibly the bee problem.
Monsanto.
Right. And of course they talk about it being possibly, and that may be, that's possible. But then again, equally possible is the fact that with these, the same as the solar flares that come in and will potentially shut down our electronics, those flares would do the same kind of the same effect it will have on our satellites in terms of screwing up the electronics. The little thing that's in the head of the bee that tells him where his nest is, if you zap them with lasers or rays or anything, or solar flares, if those swipe across an area, and you wouldn't see it, and it swipes across an area and hits where there's 27 million bees trying to find their way back home, they don't make it. And once they don't make it, they end up being dead someplace on the side of the road. And of course, that's a terrible effect on our growing. We don't have the bees pollinating growth of plants. Eventually, that's going to be a serious problem. But anyhow, that answers the question as to whether it's affecting us already. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I know now we're going to change direction. What is the role of religions in this?
Well,
in all of this?
As a matter of fact, I wanted to check on that because as a separate item when I was doing the putting together the research on the DVD. I wanted to get a good handle on that. And what I found out, to really, I don't know, I was going to say my surprise, but I don't think it was. What I discovered was that a couple of years ago, first off, what I didn't know, and maybe people that were Catholics following it closely would have known more than I did, but the Pope has always had at his calling, they had a big astronomical observatory. They had a double observatory with a big telescope for years and years right at the Vatican. All right? And a couple of years ago, they closed them down and they built a huge infrared telescope in Arizona, in the United States. And they pretty much man it, I'm sure with assistance from us and everything, but basically it belongs to the Vatican. And it was aiming in a specific direction on a specific mountain, and a big deal is it was infrared. The Nibiru and Planet X being the same thing, different name, it does not have its own light at all. And again, that makes it a little difficult for us to see it until it really gets in closer to the circle and orbit, the orbits of the other planets. As it comes in, it will start reflecting light from a variety of directions, particularly the sun once it gets a certain point, and it'll be visible, but not because it has its own light. So therefore, it needs to be an infrared telescope. The one that they originally discovered back in the 80s, when they finally said, uh-oh, there it is, and it's coming back in, it was a large, in-orbit, way out, a large telescope that was sent out and did finally the decent pictures because it was an infrared telescope. So from a religious point of view, I'm afraid that the Vatican and the Catholic Church has been totally up to speed and has even assisted part of it, as a matter of fact, to be helping out in terms of how to handle the people in the future here as this thing comes in closer. Obviously, they needed to have the Vatican on board, so to speak. Interestingly enough, they named, which is a little spooky, kind of creepy to me, they named the telescope in Arizona, built by the Vatican, they named it Lucifer. And I thought that was that's a little creepy for some people. That may bother them. Additionally, while I was checking out all of this interesting connection to the Vatican and their knowledge that they may have, I, of course, found out that they've had these ongoing full-time astronomers working directly at the Vatican with their telescopes for several years. I didn't realize that. And they also have this extraordinary replica in the kind of like in the front yard of the Vatican, so to speak, and it's this huge metallic ball that looks like the globe, and in the center of it, another metallic ball has crashed into it. And I have no idea from a sculpture point of view, I have no idea what it's supposed to represent. But again, it adds to the creepiness of the name Lucifer for the title of the Vatican's, their telescope that they built here in Arizona. Now, I have to add one more thing when we're talking about the present day effects already on our close-in solar system to us and to the sun and to everything else. The planets, and this again is something that can be found by people themselves, but I have it included in our DVD. All of the planets a little while back started to heat up, and their temperature on the surface of the planets and the chemistry on the external, the surface of the planets, etc., are all being activated by something, and it's heating up starting out by Pluto and coming in towards the sun. So it's not something that's taking place from the sun outward. It is something that's affecting it from the outer side towards Pluto and coming inward. And what has happened is that we have a difference in temperature on most all of them. We're having strange reactions like little wiggling, slight changes in the orbits of these planets, and we're having unusual storms and entire chemical changes on the surface of several of the planets coming inwards towards, again, from the Pluto location coming inwards towards the sun. And then, of course, additionally, and I don't know, not everybody has a good understanding of the crop circles, but I think to everyone's surprise, certainly to my surprise, when I found out what the numbers were, but it's something like 22,000 crop circles at this point in time. So those folks that thought that a couple of alcoholics came out of the bar once a week in England with boards tied to their feet and made these things, that's not where they're coming from. And I genuinely believe, I don't want to get too much into that part of it, but there have been a couple of them that have indicated graphically from let's say an artistic, graphically formed, there's been some references to Planet X and Nibiru, if you can decipher them. And then also, extraordinarily, I found out that this is kind of really hokey, but one of the designs that was utilized on the Mars rover, the actual design of the wheel that they ended up using on the Mars rover is a design that was sent down and implanted in a crop circle. So it seems like somebody's been assisting the NASA people on how to do some of their designing besides astronomical information coming in and showing Planet X. And I do have a little bit of that. I showed it because it's interesting enough. I included that also in our DVD. Do you have any other questions right now that relative to what any of this immediate information?
Actually, yes. Regarding the crop circles, do you know what necessarily are they meant for communication between one species of extraterrestrial to another, or as Linda Moulton Howe suggested, that they might be self-activating software? What is your impression of what they actually are and what their function is per se? Because some of the designs are so intricate, and they've been getting more intricate. It's almost as if they do something more than just translate.
Obviously, first off, I have to say at this point in time, I'm a firm believer, obviously, that the crop circles are being intentionally created. They're being created by some entities out in outer someplace, okay? Some entities from someplace. It could be entities that are here. I guess that's possible, certainly. But and my feeling is that, and again, this is where you have to apply some logic to something that's almost illogical, but we have to apply some common sense to this. So you have to say, why are they doing this? I mean, these are extraordinary, by the way, folks. If those people that don't keep track of these, and a lot of us don't, unless like in this situation where I specifically got into it and started looking, I knew about them and knew a little bit, but I didn't know what I know now about them. And of course, one thing is that how many there are, but the other thing is the size of some of these. For those of you that just not up to speed on these, some of these are a couple of football fields in size. These aren't just a little 200-foot across circles with some kind of a interesting graphic design. And the other point is, some of them are biological, apparently, according to people that have deciphered them. Some of them are mechanical designs related to some things. Some of them biological. Some of them are planetary. In other words, planetary descriptions of events that either have or are to take place. Now, my feeling is, and again, you get back to saying, well, why are they doing this? Because if, in fact, they are obviously being done by extremely highly elevated intellects with scientific knowledge way past ours, and if they've been coming and going from Earth, which I do believe, for 10,000 years or maybe more, maybe 50,000, I don't know, but if they've been coming and going from someplace else, obviously their ability to do that alone puts them way above us. We've only been fooling around with this kind of stuff, for 200 years or 50 years, but 200 years since we were even crawling around chasing horses around. But the bottom line is,
that's right.
You have to say, well, why are they doing it? And I'm not sure in terms of why they do this extraordinary, elaborate, descriptive art, except for the fact that if somebody or a group, whatever it would be, a group of people or someone or some 700 or whatever, we have no idea, are aware of when they're going to be showing up. In other words, day after tomorrow, be looking for one in a given place. All right, we're going to be sending you a message, and it's going to be about this or about that, and that there are people here receiving it, taking it down, photographing it, and then utilizing it like an old telex machine or an old communication of some, or even a computer drawing. But it's something that is, because what happens commonly is within a short period of time, somebody goes in and wipes it out. So whomever it is that's supposed to be receiving these, I believe they are receiving them, they're copying them, duplicating them, applying them to whatever science they're supposed to, and then they're going back into either their own little holes in the ground or going back into a United States of America laboratory, something of that sort. But I believe there are people receiving them, know when they're going to be here, know where to expect them, copy them, use them appropriately, and then they're gone. It seems extraordinarily unusual that they wouldn't simply do a good computerized communication to someone here, and as opposed to doing this artwork that they're doing.
And it makes total sense that somebody here would be translating it and knowing or intercepting or even using it. Bob, we have about 20 minutes left or so, and of course I have a big question to ask you, and then if there's anything you want to fill in regards, if there's any more important information that we overlooked, by all means feel free to change direction. With all your years of uncovering this and connecting the dots, how many different extraterrestrial races have you seen that were uncovered, and what is the interaction essentially? Does the same extraterrestrials visiting North America and South America, are they different than who's visiting Australia, or are they in different leagues with different countries? What are your thoughts about that, the different species and the alignment?
The experts that have really been chasing this for a long time, and by the way, there are some guys, God bless them, they came forward and spoke before the U.S. Congress a little while back, and they've been working together, brought together very, very high-level, important persons talking about the potential, of alien life, et cetera, and what have you. And again, as always, and as it has been for so many years, they never had proper press. The people still made fun of these people. And we're talking about highly educated scientists and astronauts heads of government, the head of the entire military for Canada, for example, came down and participated. And it's called the group is called the Disclosure Project. You know.
That was in 2001. Recently, in 2013, there was the citizen hearing on disclosure where, just like you said, scientists, military witnesses, Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister of Canada, testified in front of a mock congressional committee, 5 retired congressmen and 1 retired senator. But like you said, they didn't receive the proper press.
And again, it's just strange that they're still doing this, but they're still handling this. I guess, and it may be, I don't know. I mean, other than just plain criminal, because it really is at this point in time to make like there is no aliens coming in and out and visiting and all the rest of that, and for them to still turn their back on it and make a joke about it and all that. But again, if people are not aware, a lot of your listeners are aware of a lot of these things we're talking about. But if you're not, look up the Disclosure Project. That's what it's called. Get a look at that, because these were very high-level scientific people. And the mathematics, which I also threw in and just included in the DVD, the mathematics of how many potential planets are out there potentially that could exist with intelligence life. It's such a huge number. It's almost crazy. And for these people to continuing to make like it's like this is not a reality, it's just ridiculous. And I don't know. I can't understand why they're doing it. And the people of the earth are certainly mature enough at this point in time to simply understand, well, okay, there are, a couple thousand places where intelligent life exists, and to not believe that is goofy. And we had people like Ben Rich, who was the elderly fellow that passed away a couple of years ago, and pretty much on his deathbed, he was a fellow that headed up what they call skunk works, that did all of our above top secret spacecraft programs and ships and what have you that we've been working on for so long. And basically almost on his deathbed, so to speak, he came forward and said, we have already been flying among the stars and could take E.T., the extraterrestrial, we could take him home if he asked us. And he said, we've already been doing it. He said for as long as 30 or 40 years. But it's under a separate program. It's got nothing to do with the silly little firecracker that we shoot off from Cape Canaveral or from the Cape Kennedy every once in a while, and they show us something launching. He said it's got nothing to do with that. It's not even the same transportation. And this is the gentleman that was in charge of the above top secret design and construction of our spacecraft for like 30 years. And he said, we've been doing it and have had the ability to do all of that. And you're never going to hear about it because it's so top secret. The people that run top secret operations don't even know. So anyhow, you have people like that coming forward now and admitting that that's where we are at. And NASA now has admitted that there are wormholes in space that open up on a regular basis and have been doing it for quite a while under a natural process in space. We have the transportation that we're talking about, by the way, and I'm not going to get into much of this at all, but it's the warping of space and time. I do get into it a little bit in the DVD, but the point is you can't go just in a rocket ship and start flying for many, many years and going someplace. It would take too much time. It's impossible. But what it is a method by which we now are doing it, and that is warping of space and time. Now, let me get to the big question everybody asks about. Everybody wants to know, when is this potentially going to come by? When would be the closest time? And what will happen? Well, in terms of what will take place, if the Planet X passes as it has been analyzed by many experts, not myself, I'm strictly the messenger, if you will. If it does what they anticipate, it will come in at a point in time where, and again, this is relative mostly to the previous times that it has passed by, and that is logged in not only in the Bible, but in almost every antiquated manner by which biblical script or script of the ancient peoples has been literally written down by Chinese emperors going back to the year 1000 AD, and going back to carvings on the walls and the deciphering of Dr. Sitchin when he went over the 4,000-year-old clay tablets from Sumeria, and a huge number of such writings, including from the Tibetan monks on the top of the hills in Tibet, going back 1,000 years, et cetera, et cetera. Now, all these things written down almost in a what I would call like a diary of these people going back that far. All right, they're all come with pretty much an identical date time to predict this. All right, it is anticipated that it will come in and go around the sun and then go back out again. First to be seen in the sky as a star, and even though it's probably 5 or 6, 4 or 5 moons along with Nibiru coming through, and it's dragging a huge tail of space debris behind it. That's going to be a real serious problem when it comes. But it will first just look like a one star, and that will probably be in the month of December in terms of being seen for the first time. And by December, we'll get to what year I'm talking about in just a moment. But it'll be seen as a singular star coming inward. Obviously, it'll get bigger and bigger. This will be the point in time where the martial law will have to already be in effect 60 to 90 days before they expect people to see it, because it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as it comes in. They want to have complete control of everybody on the surface, and they want to be down in their hideouts that they've been digging for themselves when that happens. They want to be in there before the stuff hits the fan. All right? It will take then the anticipated dating chronology of this is seen in December, getting larger and larger, and then December, January, February, then March and April, it will be passing closest at that point in time, March and April of whatever year it comes. All right? And when it comes, it's not going to hit the Earth, but it will come in, go around the sun, and then head back out. That trip will take approximately 150 days. We will come in, when it goes around for the first time, we will pass through the tail of that thing. It will take about an hour, 1 full hour to pass through the tail. And when we go through the tail, we will be bombarded by all manner of meteorites. All right, so that's going to be a serious problem. It will go around the sun and back out, and we once again, on our regular orbit of 360 days, on our regular orbit, at approximately 150 days, we will go through the tail once again. So we will pass through it twice. But before it even gets that close to where that's a concern, the likelihood of the gravitational effect on the Earth will be the replication of Noah's floods, which is what Noah's floods were when it took place. All right? The floods will be the same thing over again. And it's a gravitational effect on the entire globe and the crust of the globe. It will yank the waters out of the seabeds and throw them up on the shore. Tidal waves obviously would be horrendous. The meteorites and space debris and junk we're going to pass through twice, that's going to be serious. But we will already be most likely thrown into darkness because of the solar flares that it's going to yank out of the sun. It's going to cause solar flares from the sun probably before it even gets close enough to be worried about meteorites and going through the tail of junk of this thing. By the way, the tail on Halley's Comet, which again, this is just a comet, it's not a planet, that the tail on Halley's Comet is 24 million miles long when it goes across the sky so we can see it. We have no idea how long the tail of garbage and space debris is going to be dragged around behind a planet that is 5 times larger than Earth. And we have to remember, the moon and the sun has a daily up and down, in and out effect with its gravities on our oceans. That's what causes our tides back and forth and what have you. That's just the moon and the sun way out there. When this guy comes around, if it's a solid mass, which they're anticipating it probably is, it's not a gas, and it's not frozen ice, not an ice ball like like Halley's Comet. It's pretty much a solid bulk. They're anticipating, because they have tracked it previously from the historic writings, they anticipate that it may shift the Earth on its axis about 26 degrees in a fairly short period of time. And that has taken place previously according to the ancient writings and in the biblical descriptions of what took place on its previous passage. Now, again, there's one other little, and this doesn't mean much, but there's one other little dispute between the left hand and the right hand as to information on Nibiru's passing. Some people are firm on the belief that it's 3,600 years. There's a very, very logical argument that it actually is 350 or 360 years. Now, that means it would have passed 10 different times at different periods of time in the 3,000-year history, as opposed to just once every 3,000. And the big argument on that is primarily based on several historic writings describing the passing of this unknown visiting star, which is what the Chinese astronomers had written down. They called it the visiting dragon or the visiting star, and they indicate that it's come many more times. The Bible indicates that it potentially had maybe come on a 350-year cycle and not 3,000. So, but the bottom line is that doesn't make any difference to you and I. We want to, when it comes, and whether it's been here 10 times or only been here once in 3,000 years, I don't care, okay? The bottom line is this. The most agreed upon for those people that are studying and believe it'll be here, and I guess apparently that includes the governments of the world, the most likely date is that it will be first seen this coming December, and that in 4 or 5 months after being seen this December, it will pass close to the Earth. If it does not happen this year, which is considered to be most likely, if it does not happen at the end of this year, starting to come in on December, it will be, the next likely time would be 1 more year away, right? And then the least likely is 3 years. So the feeling is, the belief, I'm looking at it from two different directions. One is the people that have been studying it, and including studying the time element related to old writings, or et cetera, and even the Bible. The belief is that it will probably be this December. All right. If it's not, then we will have a breather for a full year. But the other people that I'm looking at is they're putting the foods into the holes in the ground today. The government is filling their holes in the ground with the food as if they're going to need it this year or next year, the first of next year, and that's why they're filling it up. They're not doing it for 20 years from today.
So they're actually getting ready as we speak, and it could be as early as you said, by the end of this year, if at the latest, the least likely, 3 years. We got just literally a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask you this final question. What can we, as citizens, listeners, the population of the world, do to avoid any of this catastrophe or anything with what the government's going to do? Like I said, we only got a couple of minutes left. What would you say to everybody?
I got to be honest with you. The reality is the bad guys don't even know how they're going to make it through being underground with all the food and all the facilities and all the guards and all the guns and the weapons to keep us out, et cetera, and doing their thing. They have no idea how they're going to make it for sure. The bottom line is this is something that if it takes place, and I hope I'm wrong, okay, period. I certainly hope that I am totally off base, and everybody, and they got another good reason for all the things we've talked about, but I don't think there is. There's nothing we can do about it, and I highly recommend that people don't change your life at all. Just live your life like you're supposed to live it. Take care of your family and yourself. And you do not have enough money to do anything. You can't go dig your own hole that these guys have done with all of the billions of dollars. You don't have the manner by which to do that. If you might get hit by a truck tomorrow, but you got to go to work tomorrow anyhow. Don't worry about getting hit by a truck, and don't worry about getting bombarded by Nibiru. Live your life to the fullest. Do what you're supposed to do. Take care of your family. Take care of yourself as it relates to your own God, and God be with you. But you cannot change it. Nobody can change it. If, in fact, this is going to happen, which it looks like it is, and if it's going to happen, it may happen and begin at the end of this year. If it doesn't, then we have a year or two breather. But again, I get back, these bad guys that are doing the underground facilities and keeping their mouths shut and getting ready for controlling us up here when they close the doors behind them, they're doing it on the basis that they're going to need that in a short period of time. They're not getting ready for 20 years from today.
That's a fascinating message to give to everyone, Bob, because you're absolutely right. You don't know if you're going to die in an earthquake next week or get hit by a truck tomorrow. We have to live our life as we need, and all we can do is adjust to what happens. Everybody, this has been a fascinating interview with Bob Fletcher. Be sure and check out his website, Bob Fletcher Investigates.
Yes,
did you say .com or .info?
BobFletcherInvestigations.com.
BobFletcherInvestigations.com, and of course DRJ, DrJRadioLive.com. And at a later date, this interview will be uploaded for all you to hear in perpetuity. With that being said, this is Dr. J, Dr. J Radio Live, signing out.